Target locked.
Target locked.
Fire.
On a moonless night, the Strait of Hormuz lay eerily calm, but the quietest places are often where storms strike fastest. At dawn on April 26th, a civilian oil tanker sent out a distress signal, and within minutes, Iranian warships appeared as if they had been lying in wait. Unknown to many, 7 Iranian frigates armed with Russian-supplied anti-ship missiles formed a spearhead formation closing in on U.S. ships in international waters. Above, Iranian Su-35s patrolled the skies. In the distance, Chinese radars tracked every move of the U.S. Navy. It seemed like the prelude to a tense standoff, but then from beneath the sea, Tomahawk missiles launched. From the skies, F-15Es locked onto their targets, and from the south, B-1B Lancers approached Iranian airspace. In just 11 minutes, an entire Iranian fleet was engulfed in flames. As the sea turned red, Iran realized they had made a grave mistake. What was happening? What caused an entire Iranian fleet to be consumed by fire? Welcome to B-21 Raider, where conflicts are not just recounted but dissected through an expert's lens. Here the battlefield is not merely a place of combat, but a stage revealing power, strategy, and geopolitical ambitions. Let's return to the events in the Strait of Hormuz, a name that sounds distant but determines the fate of nearly a third of the world's oil supply. Every day, over 20 million barrels of oil pass through this strait. That's why every movement here can shake the globe. In the early months of 2025, the air in the Strait of Hormuz was no longer calm as usual. Iranian warships appeared more frequently, moving closer to international shipping lanes and carrying weapons they didn't possess just a few years ago. Why was Iran so bold? Did they possess a new strength that gave them the confidence to provoke the United States in the most sensitive waters on the planet? The answer lies in 2 familiar names, Russia and China. Under the shadow of sanctions, Iran quietly received long-range naval radars from China, multi-target fire control systems designed to integrate with Russian-made Yakhont cruise missiles, and intelligence reports even suggested Iran was testing the deployment of S-400 air defense systems on its warships. Backed by 2 global powers, Iran no longer saw itself as just a regional force but as a naval arm, representing the Russia-China-Iran alliance in the Middle East. On April 23rd, the U.S. Central Command, CENTCOM, detected a series of unusual signals. Iran's fleet, consisting of 12 warships, including Muj-class frigates, Sina-class missile boats, and Suicide fast boats, formed an unusual formation heading straight for international shipping lanes. On radar, this formation looked like a dagger aimed at the world's throat. At the same time, satellite signals revealed Su-35s appearing at a base near Bandar Abbas. What was happening? Was Iran acting alone, or was this a calculated move by 3 parties, a test to probe the U.S. response? In the Situation Room at the Pentagon, President Donald Trump listened silently to each report. He didn't speak immediately. Not until satellite imagery showed a merchant ship being intercepted by Iranian fast boats did Trump utter a single sentence. "We're not there to negotiate, we're there to extinguish the threat before it spreads across the region." That sentence signaled the start of a top-secret operation called Sea of Fire. From Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, F-15E fighters took off. On the deck of the USS Gerald R. Ford F-35s began loading missiles. Beneath the sea, 2 Virginia-class submarines quietly left their patrol positions, heading north. Simultaneously, EA-18G Growlers were deployed to prepare to jam Iran's entire radar network. But the plan wasn't just about responding. The US wasn't striking to deter, it was striking to end. From Space Command, surveillance satellites noted Iran's early warning radars operating at maximum capacity. Some signals indicated interference from Chinese-developed AI data analysis systems, meaning Iran was receiving target data from foreign satellites and was ready to pull the trigger. But there was one thing Iran didn't know. Their radars were being blinded by growlers from afar, and their AI systems were thrown into synchronized disruption. Meanwhile, beneath the sea, Tomahawks had already locked onto their coordinates. F-15Es completed target assignments, and from bases in Europe, B-1B Lancers began their journey. As the clock struck 0:00 on April 26th, a Global Hawk UAV flying high above transmitted a final signal to the Pentagon. A single word, clear. Immediately, Tomahawk cruise missiles launched from Virginia-class submarines, slicing through the water, flying low over the sea. F-15Es from the south accelerated, flying at medium altitude, disabling active radars, and approaching in passive electronic mode. In less than 90 seconds, Iran's Alborz frigate was engulfed in flames. But the most terrifying moment was yet to come, as hidden behind thick clouds to the west were 4 B-1B Lancers, carrying a total of 96 JASSM missiles, 900-kilometer range, fully stealth, and accurate to within half a meter. Their target, Iran's entire naval logistics infrastructure along the southern coast. Meanwhile, on the surface, U.S. Arleigh Burke-class destroyers fired SM-6 missiles, intercepting Iran's Nord missiles launched from afar. Not a single one got through. Not a single Su-35 took off in time. Iran's fleet could only watch through thermal cameras before sinking into despair. The question arises, why couldn't a force backed by Russia and China mount any resistance against this lightning U.S. strike? Is it that weapons aren't the deciding factor but the decision maker? Donald Trump is not a president who negotiates. He doesn't wait for the enemy to break the rules before reacting. He sees a threat and eliminates it before it takes shape. That's the difference in America's strength under Donald Trump. A strength not just from missiles, radars, or UAVs, but from the speed of decision-making and unhesitating action. As the first light dawned over the Strait of Hormuz, Iran's remaining warships were nothing but burning hulks. Shore radars were silenced, command systems neutralized, and the world watched in stunned silence. One final question. Would Russia and China intervene, or would they stand by like bench players, letting their ally be devoured by the precise blade of the U.S. Navy? The Strait of Hormuz, once a line between conflict and balance, became a strategic fracture between what Iran believed and the bitter reality it faced. Darkness cloaked the sea, fires smoldered from massive steel ships, and inside the destroyed command bunkers was a silence as chilling as it was profound. Only then did Iran realize that America's strike wasn't a warning. It was a complete eradication of Iran's ability to threaten maritime routes. At 3:18 a.m. local time on April 26th, the Commander-in-Chief of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, activated an emergency communication system in an underground command center in Shiraz. A message was sent via the Nahid Dawai military satellite, short but clear. U.S. forces are launching a full-scale attack. We've lost control at sea. Request immediate support from Moscow and Beijing. Outside, surviving officers on shore stared at blank radar screens. The entire coastal radar network had been disabled by electromagnetic jamming rounds from EA-18G growlers. All civilian satellite signals were blocked. leaving only a few internal lines disrupted by high-frequency interference. At that moment, Iran did the only thing it could: beg Russia and China for help. But no response came. In Moscow's Strategic Command Center, Iran's report arrived in under 10 minutes. Russian generals remained silent, making no immediate decisions. They knew what was happening and that intervening now meant crossing America's red line while Russia was still bogged down in Ukraine's western front. The Su-35s supplied to Iran remained grounded in their hangars, unready for combat. The reason was simple. Iranian pilots lacked the experience to operate Su-35s in real combat. Training was incomplete and coordination systems still relied on Russian experts who dared not leave their bases. A senior Russian military advisor in Latakia, Syria, sent a message to the general staff. If we order a takeoff, Iran will lose both the Su-35s and the reputation of Russian hardware. Silence is the best option. Meanwhile, in Beijing, Iran's report reached the Chinese Ministry of Defense through a secure channel. The response from Chinese leadership was deliberate indifference. At the time, China's foreign ministry was preparing for a high-level trade summit with the European Union. Any military intervention would shatter their negotiation efforts. And what did Beijing choose? They chose to stand aside. A Chinese foreign ministry spokesperson later told the press, "We do not participate, do not ally, and do not encourage any military action. This is a bilateral conflict between the United States and Iran." In other words, Iran was alone. No Russia, no China, not a single reply. At that moment, the Pentagon received reports that Iran had sent out distress calls. Immediately, the U.S. greenlit the second wave of attacks, Wave 2. This time, the targets weren't warships, but Iran's naval command and logistics systems. From Incirlik Air Base in Turkey, 4 B-1B Lancers, refueled midair, carried over 90 long-range JASSM cruise missiles, 900-kilometer range, fully stealth, accurate to within a meter. Within 45 minutes, the JASSMs, flying low over the sea, slipped through air defenses, striking the Bandar Abbas naval base, the Jask Naval Munitions Depot, and the Su-35 Coordination Center at Bandar Lenge Airfield. A chain of explosions erupted. Iran's entire naval supply chain was severed. In the IRGC's temporary command room, one officer shouted, "We have no information from the southern coast." Another yelled, "No satellite signals. Radar's blind. No targets identified." This was no longer war, but the systematic dismantling of a military apparatus in silence and absolute precision. At this point, one surviving Iranian ship attempted to retaliate. The Jamaran frigate fired 2 Nor missiles, medium-range anti-ship weapons developed by Iran. But 12 seconds later, a US EA-18G Growler detected the Jamaran's radar signal, and a single AGM-88 HARM missile set the ship ablaze. Why could the US react so quickly? The answer lies in a multi-layered sensor network, from space satellites to high-altitude UAVs to surface radars, all connected in real time. This wasn't a war of brute force, but a war of data, sensors, and precision, where the US is the only nation with a seamless chain from detection to destruction. Donald Trump, who personally greenlit the Sea of Fire operation, didn't just aim to deter Iran, but to prove a point. No alliance is strong enough without independent combat capability, and no weapon is fearsome without a decisive leader. What chilled Russia and China wasn't the bombs, but the speed of response, the element of surprise, and one clear truth: America doesn't wait to be attacked. It obliterates the threat first. The question arises, If it wasn't Iran but another nation, if it wasn't Hormuz but Taiwan, the South China Sea, or the Baltic, would Russia and China dare to bet? Or would they continue to watch their allies burn? After two devastating waves of strikes from B-1B Lancers and Tomahawks, only 3 Iranian warships remained operational, including the Jamaran frigate, a Mauj-class missile ship considered the pride of Iran's navy, and 2 armed fast boats often used to harass U.S. ships and the backbone of the IRGC's swarm tactics. The question now was, would Iran dare to counterattack, or would they retreat? The answer, no one retreated. For Iran, retreat meant admitting defeat, and in Tehran's military mindset, defeat was never an option. At 3:41 a.m., the Jamaran activated its active radar. 2 Noor cruise missiles, each with a range of over 120 kilometers, were fired toward the U.S. destroyer USS Delbert Black. The missiles, copies of China's C-802, were upgraded by Iran, traveling at medium speed but with an ultra-low trajectory to evade radar. But as soon as the Jamaran's radar came online, a U.S. EA-18G Growler pinpointed its signal. A single AGM-88 HARM anti-radar missile traveling at over Mach 2 struck the Jamaran's navigation antenna in just 12 seconds. The ship's entire control system was disabled, leaving it drifting aimlessly. Simultaneously, the USS Delbert Black's SPY-6 radar locked onto the 2 Noor missiles. The Aegis system calculated their trajectories, enabling the launch of SM-2 Block 3B interceptors. Both Noor missiles were shot down mid-air. One exploded above the sea, the other fell just over 300 meters from the U.S. ship's bow. No losses for the U.S., but Iran's entire defense system collapsed in under 5 minutes. Above, a U.S. Air Force MQ-9 Reaper UAV, flying at over 12,000 meters, used its EO/IR sensors to pinpoint the remaining Iranian fast boats. 2 suicide boats loaded with explosives were heading toward the USNS Supply Logistics ship. As soon as their coordinates were relayed to the operations center, an F-35B received orders to engage. 2 GBU-31 JDAM smart bombs obliterated both boats in the Dark Sea. The second explosion was just over a kilometer from the U.S. ship. At this point, no Su-35s took to the air. Russia forbade it. The Bandar Lenge base had been destroyed in the earlier wave. Iran was out of moves on the battlefield. No radar, no logistics, no support, no central command. The U.S., in contrast, operated as a single entity. Under a real-time coordination network, every piece of data from UAVs, satellites, ship radars, and fighters was processed by the U.S. Air Force's tactical AI system. Never before had a naval campaign been orchestrated with such advanced data technology. Donald Trump once said, "We don't need more troops, just the right technology, the right timing, and no hesitation." And that's what created something the Iranians had never witnessed. A campaign of total destruction where the enemy had no chance to fight back. By 4:12 a.m., all Iranian warships were out of commission. A few Iranian rescue boats set out from Keshem Island to search for survivors, but were forced to turn back when U.S. UAVs warned them of violating the tactical safety zone. At Al Dhafra Air Base in the UAE, U.S. commanders reviewed losses. No ships hit, no American lives lost. The entire operation from detection to attack to neutralization took less than 4 hours. Then the sun began to rise. A beam of light shone on Iran's southern waters, illuminating not ships cutting through waves but smoldering wrecks. Commercial satellite Maxar released a high-altitude image showing a sea glowing red as if ablaze. The Strait of Hormuz was no longer a symbol of threat, but proof of what happens when a nation thinks it can challenge the United States. Why does this matter? Because behind the victory was not just firepower, but a global warning. What did Russia see? What did China see? What did the world learn? An Iran, Russia, China alliance couldn't stand against an America that knows when to act and has a president unafraid to act. As the sun rose and the gun smoke cleared over the Strait of Hormuz, what remained wasn't just charred shipwrecks in the ocean, but a profound lesson in geopolitics, modern warfare, and the truth of military power. In less than 4 hours, the U.S. executed a massive military operation, coordinating 3 branches: Navy, Air Force, and electronic warfare. The attack was precise, swift, and nearly lossless. Over half of Iran's surface fleet was completely destroyed. Russian-supplied Su-35s couldn't take off. Chinese-supported radars were thoroughly jammed. In Tehran, emergency meetings were held non-stop. Military leaders tried to restore communications and re-establish command, but all efforts were futile. Command systems were severed, shore radars destroyed, logistics depots hit by JASSMs, and surviving ships could only send distress signals. Was this the US's greatest victory in the Middle East since the Iraq War? Perhaps. But more importantly, it was a reminder to the world, in this new era where wars are no longer fought with tens of thousands of ground troops, but decided by data, sensors, and reaction time, only the nation that masters modern command chains truly controls the battlefield. And that nation is the United States. According to preliminary estimates from Western military analysts, Iran lost 11 warships, including 4 large frigates. 2 naval bases were hit, Bandar Abbas and Jask. The entire southern coast radar network was knocked out of action. 2 of Iran's 4 Su-35s were destroyed on the ground. Command centers were paralyzed by precision strikes. Total damages were estimated at over $32 billion, not just in weapons, but in strategic prestige. Most critically, Iran lost what had given them the most confidence, the illusion of protection from Russia and China. After the battle, neither Moscow nor Beijing openly criticized the US. They chose silence. Russian state media focused on developments in Ukraine. Chinese media highlighted trade summit news with Europe. No public condemnation, no defense of their ally. What did the world see in that silence? That even the closest allies retreat when the cost is too high. The simple truth is, Russia couldn't risk opening another front, and China wasn't ready to sacrifice economic deals to save Iran. The US needed no threats, no tweets, just action. The next morning, President Donald Trump appeared on national television, his face calm, his gaze steely, and declared to the world, "We didn't attack out of hatred, we acted for international maritime safety, and if any nation threatens that, this will be the outcome." That speech wasn't just for Iran, but a direct message to Russia, China, and anyone plotting to challenge the global order. Donald Trump didn't need prolonged wars. He didn't support massive troop deployments, but he believed in true deterrence. Not in words, but in the first strike. And when it was time to act, he didn't hesitate. The Sea of Fire battle in Hormuz raised a big question. Does the world still doubt the US's military dominance? While other nations calculate, hesitate, and evade, America ended an enemy fleet in less than a night. While other air defenses falter, the US used UAVs, fighters, bombers, and submarines linked through real-time data networks. No one else, only the US, has that technology. Only the US can orchestrate such a complex campaign with near perfect precision. And only Donald Trump was bold enough to order its activation, bypassing the UN Security Council, with no compromises. There's one thing no one dares say aloud, but everyone knows. If this battle had happened in Taiwan, the South China Sea, or the Baltic near Poland, the outcome might be similar. Because while nations like China and Russia believe they can threaten the global order by quietly backing smaller states, the US proved it takes just one night to change the game. The Strait of Hormuz is no longer a symbol of threat, but a testament to the truth of 21st century military power. Strength doesn't come from the number of ships or allies, but from rapid decision-making, mastery of technology, and fearlessness in confrontation. And if anyone asks who truly rules the world, the answer isn't in Moscow or Beijing. It's in Washington, where a man named Donald Trump taught the world a lesson about the real line between words and action. Thank you for watching our analysis of this conflict. Here, we don't just tell stories. We dissect every move, every tactic, every shadow behind each war. If you're passionate about geopolitics, military power, and what's really happening behind the scenes of global battlefields, B21 Raider is the channel for you. Don't forget to subscribe, as each video paints a new picture full of data, analysis, and truths not everyone dares to speak. And if you find this content compelling, leave a comment to share your perspective. War is not a game, and every viewpoint matters.